I required to stand behind the podium, or can I come out front a little bit? I think I will come out front. So I can see you all better. So I'm thinking, when we're talking about the next step, we have to ask ourselves, the step from where and the step to where. It's kind of a bigger picture question. If we don't ask ourselves that question, then, just as Ali said, we might end up where we're going already, blindly following the direction that we've always followed. And I think that we all have a sense that something different is possible, something new, something that we couldn't even have imagined before. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the big picture of where we are as a species, all of humanity, where we are at this special moment in history, and where we could be going. And I promise that it will not be boring, although it might be a little challenging sometimes. I don't know if any of you had the same thoughts that I had. Here we're looking at technology and really a world of miracles, things that were unimaginable a generation or 2 generations ago, even in the minds of science fiction writers, are happening today before our eyes. And so on the one hand, we have this feeling of wonder and of infinite possibilities. On the other hand, when we talk about, well, how is this going to change life? Sometimes, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but sometimes I feel kind of a sense of disappointment when someone says, well, you'll be able to have your cell phone hooked up to your refrigerator, so you can monitor your refrigerator at all times. And like, how many people right now are curious about the temperature in your refrigerator? Raise your hand. 4 degrees, 3 degrees, 5 degrees, right? Not, like, is that really going to change your life? Or even something like video conferencing at the airport, or being on vacation and being able to video conference on vacation. Like, is that really going to, is that what we're wanting when we look at the possibility of miraculous changes, of big changes? Part of me is like, is that it? Isn't it supposed to be more than that? And I think that it is going to be much more than that. And I'd like to give you a picture, because I'm not anti-technology, but I think that the true role of technology is only beginning to appear today. We're only beginning to understand why humanity has gone on this thousands of years journey into a technological realm. So I think I'll take you back a few thousand years, maybe a few million years, to give you an appreciation for where we are today. And I want you to ask yourself as I speak, to keep in mind the question of what is this all for? And are we really happier? And what makes human beings happy? Some of the speakers were talking about the increase in broadband connectivity, the number of minutes people spend on the telephone, and the growth rate of the IT sector. But part of us is also aware that just because we're having more broadband connections or talking on the phone more doesn't mean that we're having more intimate conversations. It doesn't mean that we're having closer connections to other people. It doesn't mean, does it, that we really know each other better than we did before? Do we really know each other better than 2 people in a traditional village in Anatolia? Technology is supposed to serve us, but sometimes it seems that we are the ones serving technology, becoming busier and busier and busier. And there's kind of this promise of technology that says, well, someday, maybe not now, maybe you're busier now, but someday it's going to make life easier. Someday we're going to have an age of leisure where we don't have to work so hard. And this has been a promise of technology for hundreds of years. Even in 1800, futurists like myself, I would consider myself a futurist. In 1800, futurists were saying, look, a machine can do the work of 1,000 men. Therefore, very soon, each man will have to work only 1,000th as hard. But that's not what happened. We worked harder than ever. In 1984, the futurist Alvin Toffler said, by the year 2000, the greatest problem facing humanity will be what to do with all of our leisure time. Because it was obvious the computer would take over mental labor just like the machine took over physical labor, and there would be almost nothing for us to do. And that hasn't happened yet. In my country, in the United States, people are working harder than they did in 1973. So in a lot of ways, there's this kind of promise of technology that hasn't been fulfilled, leaving us with a sense, on the one hand, of disappointment, and on the other hand, there's still a great expectation that will never die. Because all of us know that the world is supposed to be more wonderful, more beautiful than what has been given to us as normal. And that is an understanding that lies within all of us. And all of us, on some level, want to be in service to this more beautiful world. We want to devote our gifts, to devote our talents toward creating the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. So I'm going to take you back a few million years here, because this story of technology is more than just a couple hundred years old. It's older than the IT sector. It goes back thousands or even millions of years. You could say 3 or 4 million years to the age of stone tools, the first artificial objects that humans made. And we became, therefore, different from other animals. And we were able to manipulate the environment with our hands and our tools. So we became a little separate from nature. And that was millions of years. And then, a few 100,000 years ago, we learned to use fire. And fire made us the masters of nature. No other animal uses fire. And it created a division between the domestic realm and the wild. Inside the campfire circle was the domestic realm. Outside of it was the wild. Then 30 or 40,000 years ago, the next step came around, and that was language. Representational language, symbolic culture, representational art. A few tens of thousands of years ago it began. And so now, and that separated us from nature more because we had a layer of concepts between ourselves and the natural world. And we began to order nature conceptually. And it became ours. The next step was only a few thousand years ago with agriculture. So now it wasn't just conceptual, but we were turning other beings, other animals and plants toward human purposes with domestication. And we began to control nature. And that was another step of separation away from nature, because all of a sudden some things, some weather became bad weather, some animals became bad animals. The weeds were bad, the wolves were bad, the sheep were good, the corn was good. And we began to want to control nature, to control the floods, to control the insects, to control the weather, to change the course of rivers, and we began to do that. The next step came a few hundred years ago, and that was the Industrial Revolution. So now, not only are we changing the face of nature, but we're building completely artificial environments, transcending natural forces, transcending the limitations that affect every other animal, and with science, understanding nature in a new way. So that around that time, Descartes said, yes, our destiny is to become the lords and masters of nature, and we're doing it with technology. And it began to seem that we didn't really need nature at all, because we would engineer what we needed. We don't really need nature anymore. The most recent revolution, so each one of these was a revolution. Each one of these was a tremendous change. And with each step, human beings changed along with it. The most recent change was only a few decades ago, and it was the information revolution. You could say that that was even another step into separation from nature. Because now, not only are we living in an artificial world, more and more people are living in a virtual world, not even material. So you can see a pattern here. 3 million years ago, 300,000, 30, 40,000, a few thousand, a few hundred, a few decades. It's getting faster and faster and faster. The pace of change is getting faster and faster and faster. And so, right now, it's been 3 or 4 decades since the information revolution. And so we can expect maybe a period of very, very rapid change, reaching a singularity. And at that point, a change that is profoundly different, qualitatively different from any change that's happened before. And this change won't be another intensification of separation, because our separation from nature, our separation from community, our separation even from our own bodies has reached its extreme. It's reached its peak. And when anything reaches its extreme, it begins to give way to its opposite. So you could say that what is changing today is really everything. And I think that most people have a sense that everything is changing. When we look at the various crises that are affecting society today, like the financial crisis, the ecological crisis, the water crisis, the soil crisis, political crisis, everywhere there's crisis. What's going on here? I think most people have a sense that these are not temporary problems that can be overcome, again, to paraphrase Albert Einstein, that can be overcome by the same kind of thinking that created the problems. In the case of the financial crisis, the central bankers, the financial elites, they understand that this crisis isn't going away. All they can do is to postpone it a little bit. They call it extend and pretend. Extend the system a few more years into the future and pretend that everything is going to be okay in the end. But the crisis isn't going away, it's just being pushed from one place to another, getting worse all the time. And even in Turkey, where you had 8 or 9% growth last year, I think that there's a little bit of anxiety. Because whatever's happening in Europe, whatever's happening in the United States, it's going to affect you too. So even in the midst of growth, there's an uneasiness. An uneasiness when you look around the world and see what's happening to the environment. Even when you look in your own country and you ask, is this growth distributed equally? Is everybody benefiting? And is this really making people happier? So I'm going to put an idea out for you that you can think about. And then I'm going to explain a little bit about what it means, practically speaking, for technology and information technology in particular. So when I say everything is changing, what do I mean? What's the most basic thing that can change in a culture? The most important thing. The most important thing in any culture is the mythology. And what do I mean by the mythology? The myths. The mythology of a culture, it's how a culture answers the most important questions that a human being can ask. Questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What's important in life? What's valuable? Where did we come from and where are we going? We've had answers to those questions that have been around for hundreds of years now. They're provided in large part by science, but religion and other ways of knowing have contributed to this myth. And so it says basically, I'll answer a few of these questions. I don't have time to elaborate on the entire thing today. But one of the answers to the question, why are we here? Where did we come from? And where are we going? It says, well, human beings, we started off as these animals without even tools, but then, and we were helpless, and we were ignorant in the face of nature, but then we developed technology, and we developed science, and we were no longer helpless, but we became the masters of nature. And we developed machines, and we conquered diseases, and we put machines into our service. And someday, the story says, someday our triumph, our victory over nature will be complete. And we won't even need nature anymore. We'll be able to synthesize food. We will conquer all disease. Maybe we will even conquer death. Maybe we will merge our consciousness with computers. Maybe we will leave nature behind and go off into space. Space colonies, that's the future. Onward and upward, more and better. And you can see that way of thinking, even in that video that we saw before I spoke, where here's Turkey developing, and there's all these people in the city, and all this traffic, all these cars, and the implication is, and who knows what's next? Who knows what great things are next? And perhaps part of us still believes this myth. But in my country, it's getting harder and harder to believe. And remember, my country is called a developed country. And your country is called a developing country. I think that's a little bit arrogant, because what it's saying is, it says, someday you will be like us. We are the destination. That's what developed and developing mean. And I would ask you not to trust that. Not to trust destination Charles, destination America. Because look at what's happened to my country. I don't know how many people have traveled there and seen all of the obese people, all of the miserable people in these boxes, not knowing their neighbors, all of the sick people, the sick environments, the sick forests. I don't know if you've looked at these maps that show the deserts getting bigger every year, but I'm sure you've heard of climate change and global warming. It's becoming obvious that this technological program to conquer nature and to deliver us into paradise isn't bringing the desired results. Lifespans are not even rising anymore. People are not getting healthier, they're getting sicker. And we're not having more and more leisure time. And we don't have space colonies. And we haven't conquered all disease. In fact, new diseases are coming out of nowhere. And that's not to say that technology was a big mistake. But you could say that the myth of the ascent of humanity is becoming obsolete, and that we're beginning to suspect that the future is never going to come. And that leaves open the question, well, where are we going then? Where are we going? Where we're going is into a new kind of civilization with a new kind of technology, or a new direction for technology. And we can see a hint of where we're going in the technologies that are coming to the forefront today. All of these steps that I told you about, stone, fire, the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the information age, these were all more and more and more separation from nature. Reaching its peak, and then what? And then turning toward its opposite. Humanity is developing an ecological consciousness where we want to rejoin nature. We want to play our part in the ecosystem. In an ecosystem, every species contributes something important to another species, contributes something important to the vitality and the well-being of the collective. And humanity is no different. We have an important role to play too. We're coming into an understanding that we are here to contribute something as a species and also as individuals. And that we are here to participate in the emergence of something that's beyond ourselves as a species, and beyond ourselves as individuals. And we're beginning to understand that we are not these separate individuals, separate from other people, separate from nature, separate from the world outside of us, but that we're interconnected. And in some of my language now, you're beginning to see how the newest trends in technology are part of a new paradigm, a paradigm of interconnectedness, an ecological paradigm, a paradigm of reunion, coming back together rather than separation. On an individual level, people are beginning to understand this as well. Just like any species, each individual has an important gift to give as well. And if you find yourself in a position in life where the gift that you have isn't being expressed, if you're in a job where your gifts are not being used, or your gifts are going towards something that's not important to you, then you're going to feel like, why am I doing this? Is it just because I'm being paid to do this? And you're going to think, when do I get to do something that I care about for real? That I care about not because I'm paid to care about this. When do I get to live my life? And you'll have the feeling, I wasn't put here on earth to do this. I was put here to do something magnificent. Today, that knowledge that we're here to do something magnificent, that we're here to contribute something important to the collective, is often a very lonely knowledge. goes against the system of economic incentives, because our money system, our economic system, is still built on the old mythology. So the things that, in general, the things that bring money are the things that exploit nature, and not the things that serve nature. But if what you care about is the welfare of other people, the welfare of society, the welfare of nature, then that impulse is often going to come into conflict with the system of financial incentives. So let me just, I could talk a lot more about this transition and how all of the crises that we see today are actually a really good thing, because real change never happens without a crisis. The old world has to fall apart before a new world can be born. And so we're seeing a very natural process today. And what we're being born into is a state where humanity is in partnership with Earth, and in which we understand that the well-being of nature is our well-being too, that we can't escape the effects of what we do. And the same is true in the human world too, that the well-being of other people is my well-being too. That unlike in the old world where we're all competitors, so your well-being is not my well-being, we understand that whatever is happening to anybody on this planet, whatever is happening to any country on this planet, it's going to somehow feed back into us too, because we're all in it together. Now, I'd like to translate this a little bit into some more concrete trends in the economy and in business, and to make it really useful to you. We're going to be seeing an evolution of the money system and of the economic system into alignment with the ecology. So that, for example, today, the best business decision is usually not identical to the best ecological decision. Often they are in conflict, which is why it usually takes a little bit of courage to do anything that genuinely benefits society and genuinely benefits the natural world. You know, like you can say, well, you can try to have it both ways. You can say that our social investments are going to help our company's PR. They're going to help our image, and we're going to educate consumers, and they'll be happier people, and they'll buy more and stuff. But the PR benefits don't go very far compared to the big things that we really need to be doing today. But we're going to see changes in the money system so that, for example, it becomes very expensive to pollute. It becomes very expensive to waste energy. It becomes very expensive to draw water from the ground. All of the things that are unsustainable will become very expensive as we align money with our growing knowledge of our participation in the circle of life on Earth, which means that all of these kind of socially responsible business practices are going to become the only way to run a successful business. Those companies that are already doing a lot in this area, this isn't just like some philanthropy that, well, if we make enough money, we can afford to do this. This is an essential business strategy for the future. It's not obvious yet. But already the companies that are doing that kind of thing are more profitable than companies who are not. And this advantage comes back in mysterious ways sometimes. Maybe at the moment where you decide to implement zero waste manufacturing or something like that, you don't know how it's going to benefit your company. There's always a little bit of courage that's necessary to step into this paradigm of giving back to nature or giving back to society. But I'm saying that this is a next step that is aligned with where our species is going. Another example that we could look forward to is a change in the way that we design and manufacture things, for example, software. Some of you may have heard of things like agile software development, where, in the old model, the customer would give you specifications, you'd sign a contract, and you'd deliver a product by a certain date. Whereas in agile software development, it's an ongoing dialogue with the customer where you give them a version, they test it, they come back with feedback, and you respond to that, you give them something else, and in the end, something emerges that neither the developer nor the client even knew existed. So no longer are we imposing a design, but we're allowing something to emerge. On a larger scale, this is happening in the connected world, in the connected economy, where we really can't envision what software and what computing technology in general is going to look like in 5 years. Because it's an emergent process that arises out of the peer-to-peer interactions of millions or actually billions of people. So one thing that means is that our current concepts of intellectual property are going to become increasingly obsolete. And already it's widely understood that there's a big problem with the intellectual property system. You can see that in the recent case between Apple and Samsung, where Apple is claiming patent rights to developments in technology that are, most people say, are pretty obvious. It's not that a bunch of Apple engineers retreated into a room all by themselves and came up with some brilliant new idea. But this is the idea that is emerging out of the interactions of millions of people everywhere. And it's the natural next step. And patents have become a way of just kind of capturing something that was, and keeping it for yourself, something that is being produced by the collective. And so we're beginning to understand that you could say that we're all in this together. And I think that this, you could say that this is the purpose of technology right now. If you had to put it in one sentence, the purpose of technology, or the purpose especially of information technology, is to bring humanity together, to create platforms for co-creation, to allow us to meet each other's needs and to express our gifts. And I'll add that technology is beginning to allow us to do that with less and less money, which is quite natural when in a connected peer-to-peer world where, unlike the centralized model of, say, television, where you have a centralized node broadcasting information out to everybody, so you have a rigid distinction between the producer and the consumer. Today, that distinction is breaking down, and everybody is becoming a producer of content too. And not selling it to each other, but giving it to each other. When you put something out on Facebook, you don't charge people to come to your Facebook page, but you are a producer of content. One way to look at the revolution that's happening is it's a revolution toward a gift world. Which is how ancient people saw the world in terms of gifts, and that's how their economies worked too. And that's how an ecology works as well. Each being gives something important to the next and goes around the circle. This is a problem for economists. And this has been a problem for hundreds of years. At the beginning of my talk, I touched on the question, and I'll say it explicitly now. Why is it that we do not have an age of leisure right now? Why don't we have 20-hour work weeks? Why don't we have 10-hour work weeks? When we have 200, 300 years of labor-saving technology. When we have computers now that can do things so much faster than 30 years ago, 40 years ago, we were adding things up by hand. We can do it so much faster now. Why don't we work less? The reason is that instead of working less, at every moment in history, we've chosen to consume more instead, and to produce more instead. And this choice has been a necessity, because our money system only works in the presence of economic growth. And so to circle back to the economic crisis that I mentioned at the beginning, the reason that our crisis won't go away is that our planet is running out of room for economic growth. Because what is economic growth? What do we say when one of these speakers says the IT sector rose by 13% last year? What does that mean? It means that spending on IT rose by 13%. It means that people are paying for something that they never paid for before. When the economy grows, it means that more goods and services are being exchanged. Well, how do you create new goods and new services? One way is to find something in nature and make it into a product. Another way is to find a relationship and turn it into a service. So you can go to a country without technology where nobody pays to have a conversation, where nobody pays to go to their friend's house. And you can develop that country and turn it into a place where people pay to talk, and people pay to move. They buy cars, they ride trains, and it becomes a developed country. But on one level, nothing has really changed. People are still having conversations, people are still visiting friends, people are still going to work, but it's all much farther away, and they're paying for something that they didn't pay for before. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily a bad thing. Lots of new kinds of interactions arise in this process. What I am saying is that this process has a limit. Nature has a limit to how much of it we can convert into product. And human relationships, human communities have a limit to how much of them we can convert into services. If you need wise advice, you go to a psychologist, you go to a life coach or something like that. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but what I'm saying is that there isn't much room for growth in the developed countries. So the financial system is reaching a crisis. And the only way to postpone that crisis is to find some other countries that have some nature that can still be converted into product, and have some relationships that can still be converted into services, and to convert those too. But that will reach a limit very soon as well. It reaches a natural limit, and it also reaches kind of a spiritual limit, where we don't want that anymore, because we no longer want to be separate from nature and separate from each other. We want to come back together again. So the financial crisis is a crisis of the end of growth. And the end of growth is part of this transition I've been talking about in our basic mythology. The transition from increasing our domination of nature toward becoming participants in nature, toward an economy that is an extension of ecology and not an exception to ecology. I imagine that most people here would like to be part of this transition and not to resist it. And I guess I have no idea how much time I'm supposed to have left, but I think not much. So I'm going to end with just a little advice, or an invitation, let's say, on 3 levels: personal, organizational, and governmental. On the personal level, the transition means to step into the spirit of the gift and to recognize that you come to this world as a gifted being, that nothing that you have, not even your own life, is something that you earned. And that therefore, we all come into the world in a state of gratitude, because this world was given to us, and life and breath were given to us. And this state of gratitude means that we desire to give too. That's what gratitude is. It's the feeling, yeah, I'm so blessed, and I want to give back. So on the personal level, this transition is to step into the gift in all that we do, and to look at work not as how do I make a living, but to look at work as what can I give here? What am I here to give? On the organizational level, the same is true. So a leader becomes not the person in power, but a leader becomes somebody who creates opportunities for other people to give their gifts. Real future forward-looking people understand that we have to go towards permaculture, which is a way of farming that is ecological, that builds the soil, and actually produces much, much more food per acre. Well, a place like Turkey is actually closer to this future than the United States, because here, many people in the rural areas still have a connection to the land, an intimate connection to the land. And they're much closer to this ideal of permaculture that my country is just beginning to move toward. So that's just one small example. I think as a general principle, what's true on the personal level and the organizational level is also true on the national level, where we have to begin to ask, what are we here to give? Every country has a unique gift to give the world, and Turkey is no exception. Turkey is such a special place. Even in 2 days, I'm beginning to get a little bit of a feel for this ancient culture, almost the cradle of civilization, and a very, very rich land. So the question isn't, how can we outcompete the rest of the world?
Because look at the ecological crisis. We're all in this together. The question is, how can we contribute to the welfare of all? So I'm going to end in a minute here and give time for the other speakers. But I'd just like to invite you as you continue, as you listen to Dominic, who's speaking next, and as you listen to the other speakers and have conversations. Really, like at a conference, the best stuff happens in between the speakers, right? I mean, look at this. Here's one guy up here, and all you guys out there. Is that more like the internet, or is that more like television? It's more like television. What happens in between is more like the internet. And so I'd like you to really step into that and value that. And as you hear the other speakers and as you have conversations, begin to think in terms of what am I here to give? What is my company here to give? What unique thing do I have to offer in the spirit of service? And to begin to trust that when you do offer something in the spirit of service, that the bottom line will work out too. After all, there's almost no alternative. The old way isn't working very well anymore. And I think it's about time to take the next step. Thank you very much.